Eddie and Lucy decided to go camping in the forest for the weekend. However, they didn't know that it was protected by an angry spirit who didn't like intruders. He appeared in front of them and said,
"You have set foot into my forest uninvited. You will not be able to leave. Forget your home. With it, you will never be reunited."
"We apologize. We didn't know the forest belonged to you. Please let us out. We won't ever come back," Lucy cried. The spirit replied,
"I'll show you mercy, for you are sincere. Mysteries of my forest await you. Solve them all, and you will be able to leave."
Then he magically teleported them to the deepest, darkest part of the forest and vanished out of sight. As Eddie and Lucy walked around trying to find their way out of the forest, they came upon a river. They had to cross it to continue their journey. There were 3 different bridges in front of them. Which one should they choose to move to the other side? Do you see the weird river monster hiding under the stone bridge? It looks dangerous. And the wooden bridge looks so old, it can crash at any minute. So, they should choose this one. After Eddie and Lucy crossed the bridge, they saw 3 different paths in front of them. The first road led to a cave where giant hungry trolls were living. The second road led to the house of evil witches who needed human blood for a spell they were casting that would allow them to stay young forever. And the third road led to a swamp where an 8-headed snake was waiting for its prey. Which path should they follow? They should choose the third road because if you look carefully, you can see that up ahead, the road is forked too. It means that there's a 4th path they can take if they continue walking on this one, and they won't end up in the swamp after all. When they arrived at the end of the 4th path, they saw a wizard's hut. They thought he might be able to help them, but the gate was locked. When they tried to force it open, a magical quill came flying towards them from one of the windows of the hut and started writing a riddle in the air.
"The only being who can let you in is my familiar Arthur the Owl. He must be sleeping on a tree at this hour. To convince him, you must bring him his favorite flower. Yet, if you cannot spot him in the next few seconds, I can't help you, and forever in this forest you'll have to wander."
Can you spot where the owl is? Look there. Eddie and Lucy managed to spot not 1, but 3 owls standing on a tree branch. Only one of them was Arthur. If they don't figure out which one of them is Arthur, they won't be able to get help from the wizard. The first owl said, "The third owl is not Arthur." The second owl said,
"I am not Arthur."
And the third owl said, "I am Arthur." However, only one of them was telling the truth, and the others were lying. Can you figure out which one is Arthur? If the first owl was Arthur, then both he and the second owl would be telling the truth. If the third owl was Arthur, then he and the first owl would be telling the truth. But only one of them is telling the truth, remember? So the second owl must be Arthur. Once Eddie and Lucy figured out which one was Arthur, the remaining owls flew away. Then Lucy asked him what his favorite flower was. Arthur answered with a riddle.
"I can grow very tall. I am of the color yellow. When I am young, I follow the closest star in the sky. Can you tell what flower I am?"
Arthur's favorite flower is the sunflower. Eddie and Lucy had to bring a sunflower to Arthur for him to let them in. They asked him where they could find one, and Arthur told them that they could get it from the sunflower field that was located between the cornfield and the wheat field. When they asked which direction they should go, Arthur said this.
"If you went east, took a right turn, covered some distance in that direction, then took a left turn, and finally took another left turn, which direction would you be facing? That's the direction you must go."
Can you tell what direction that is? It's north. After Eddie and Lucy had walked for some time, an angry leprechaun jumped onto them out of nowhere and knocked them out with fairy dust. They opened their eyes in a prison cell. The leprechaun said,
"You stole my pot of gold and you're going to stay in this prison until you tell me where you hid it."
Eddie said,
"We don't know anything about your gold.
but the leprechaun didn't believe him. Suddenly, Lucy saw something strange that could help them. There was another prison cell in front of them with 3 different prisoners. Lucy noticed that one of them was going to try to escape. She suggested making a deal with the leprechaun. She said, "I will tell you which prisoner is planning to escape if you let us go. He's probably the one who stole your gold, and I promise we'll help you find it once you free us." The leprechaun agreed to the terms. Take a look at these 3 prisoners. Can you tell who's trying to escape? It's the 3rd prisoner. He has a map sticking out of his pocket. He must be up to something. The leprechaun took the map from that prisoner and let Lucy and Eddie go. He said,
"But now you have to help me find my pot of gold."
Lucy noticed a couple of notes at the back of the escape map. The first one said, "Find the pot of gold in the fields of gold." What do you think that means? Remember what Arthur said? He informed Lucy and Eddie about 3 different fields: sunflower, corn, and wheat. These 3 things are all yellow or golden. It could only mean that the leprechaun's pot of gold is in one of these fields. The road from the leprechaun's prison to the fields was foggy. They lost their way and arrived at part of the forest that even the leprechaun didn't even know about. Eddie immediately noticed 3 unusual things. Can you spot them? Even though it's still daytime, the place is dark. The mushrooms on the ground are actually tiny houses. And finally, one of the butterflies flying there in the distance is no butterfly at all. It's a fairy. As soon as Eddie spotted the fairy, it flew next to them and said,
"The fairy mother wanted me to bring everyone food, but when I asked what she wanted, she only said this: remove the outside, cook the inside, eat the outside, and throw away the inside. What I want is what this is. But I don't know what that means. Can you help me, please? Do you know the answer?"
It's a corn on the cob. The fairy thanked them for helping her. Lucy then told her that they were actually on their way to the sunflower, corn, and wheat fields, but they had lost their way. The fairy told them she was going there to get the corn on the cob or 2. They all followed her and arrived at the fields. After the fairy got her corn, she asked them what they were looking for. The leprechaun said,
"We're looking for my pot of gold."
The fairy told them that there was a maze in all 3 fields. At the center of each maze, there was a pot of gold, but only one pot had real gold in it, and the others were fake. The real one was in the maze that had the shortest way from start to center. Can you tell which one that is? It's the sunflower maze. The leprechaun, happy to get his gold back, bid farewell to Eddie and Lucy. They picked a sunflower for Arthur and headed back to the wizard's hut. On their way there, they heard a scream. They ran toward it and saw 3 princesses. They all said they needed help because 2 monsters were following them. Only one of them was a real princess who was telling the truth. The other 2 were actually monsters. Can you tell who? The real princess is the second one. If you look closer, you can see that the first princess has a monster's tail, and the third princess has tiny ogre ears. So she would be one of the monsters chasing the real princess too. After helping the princess, Eddie and Lucy arrived at the hut and gave Arthur the sunflower. In return, he let them in. The wizard greeted them and asked what he could do for them. They said they wanted to get back home. The wizard said he knew a spell to open a portal, but the special ingredient he needed was coded. The wizard showed them the page in the spell book. Can you tell what the special ingredient is? It's one piece of feather from a crow. The wizard prepared the spell, but something went wrong with it, and instead of 1, 3 magical portals appeared. Behind the first one, they could see a knight holding an axe. Behind the second one, they could see a robot shooting lasers from its eyes. Behind the third one, they could see a vampire with a dagger in his hands. Only the safest one would transport them home. Which one is it? It's the door with the vampire, of course. The dagger is silver, and vampires can't touch that. That must only mean he is not a real vampire, maybe some guy in a costume. Who knows? Who is wanted? The girl on the right. She has the same mole as the girl on the poster. Who is an identity thief? It's the man on the right. His real ID is sticking out of his backpack, which means he must be showing a fake ID. Who is an imposter? The girl on the left. The script she's reading is turned upside down. It means she only pretends to be an actress. Who is the real thief? Both of these men are thieves. While one man is distracting the girl, the other is preparing to steal her phone. The last will of Mr. Wilson, a rich businessman, got stolen. There were 5 people in the house at that moment: Mr. Wilson's wife, their cook, butler, maid, and gardener. They all told the detective what they'd been doing that evening. Mrs. Wilson was sitting by the fireplace embroidering. The cook was making breakfast. The butler was supervising several workers in the living room. The maid was sweeping the floors in the hallway. The gardener was watering the plants in the greenhouse. Right after this conversation, the detective arrested the thief. Who is the culprit? And how'd the detective figure it out? The cook is the thief. He said he'd been preparing breakfast, but the crime happened in the evening. Lily owned a flower store. One day, she got a call from the police. They told her that her shop had been robbed. When she arrived, shards of glass were on the ground near the store, and the pots and plants inside were broken. The police questioned 3 suspects. Jacob, Lily's ex, said, "I was in a hurry and didn't notice that the windows were broken when I was passing by the store. I only realized what had happened when the police called me." Camille, Lily's friend, said,
Lily asked me to help her with something in the store. When I arrived, everything had already been broken. I called the police immediately.
Matt, Lily's ex-coworker, said,
I was walking nearby and I saw someone breaking a window and sneaking into the shop. I left my phone at home, so I ran to the police station.
Can you guess who's lying? Matt is lying. Shards of glass were laying on the ground, which meant that the criminal had to break the window from the inside. Let's take a little break. Now, you need to think fast. Mary's mom has 4 daughters. One daughter is called April, the second is named May, and the third daughter is June. What's the 4th daughter's name? It's Mary, of course. Who doesn't belong to this list? Napoleon Bonaparte, Queen Elizabeth, William Shakespeare, Sherlock Holmes, Aristotle, Christopher Columbus, Donald Trump. Sherlock Holmes. He's the only fictional character on the list. 8 girls are in the house, and each of them is busy with something. The first one is cooking dinner. The second one is lighting the fireplace. The third girl is playing chess. The fourth one is reading a book. The fifth girl is drawing a picture. The sixth is cleaning up the house. The seventh girl is watering the plants. What is the eighth girl doing? She's playing chess with the third girl. One woman turned 40 in 1850, but in 1860, she was 30 years old. How could this happen? This could only happen if 1860 was earlier than 1850, which means that the woman turned 40 in 1850 BCE and 30 in 1860 BCE. An artist was walking in the park when it suddenly started raining. He had neither a hat nor an umbrella to cover his head. He also couldn't hide under a tree because the downpour was too heavy, and still, not a single hair on his head got wet. How can that happen? The artist was bald. Now let's get back to our detective riddles. Robert won $1 million in the lottery. He decided not to tell anyone about this, including his wife. At home, he put his money in a safe hidden behind a painting. The next day, the money disappeared. The police invited all the suspects for questioning. Emily, Robert's wife, said, "In the morning, I went to my husband's home to clean up there. The safe was open and there was nothing inside." James, Robert's business partner, said, "Poor Robert, he always wanted to win a lottery. I stayed at home all day and yesterday and watched TV." And Mark, Robert's friend, said, "I was at the gym last night, then I went home. I can't imagine why anyone would do this." The police arrested the thief. Can you guess who it was? Robert's business partner did this. Robert didn't tell anyone that he'd won the lottery. His wife noticed an empty safe when she entered the office, but she didn't know what was inside. Marina was participating in a figure skating championship. She was a very strong competitor, and many people believed she could win. When the time for a warm-up ran out, all the participants started preparing for the performance. Marina was the first. She was amazing, but suddenly she tripped, fell down, and broke her leg, which made her unable to continue. The investigation revealed that someone had ruined her skates. The police interviewed 3 suspects. Anna said, "I didn't do anything, but I saw Jacqueline and Kate walking into the locker room before Marina's performance. They're the ones who ruined her skates." Jacqueline said, "Yes, I indeed went into the locker room to take my things, but I didn't see Kate there." And Kate said, "Yeah, that's because I've been practicing in the gym until it was my turn. Besides, Anna is lying. I saw her in the locker room." Can you guess who's lying? Kate. She couldn't train in the gym because the time for the warm-up had been over by the time the competition started. Here's what happened. Kate went into the locker room and ruined Marina's skates. Jacqueline came into the locker room after her, and that's what Anna saw. Jane is afraid that she might have a stalker. She brought some photos of herself and her friends to the police. The police immediately found the culprit. Who is Jane's stalker? Jane's friend Mike. He's the only one who is present in all the photos, and sometimes he even tries to conceal his identity. The investigation didn't have enough evidence to prove the suspect was guilty. Detective Reed decided to investigate their house, hoping to find some clues, and he actually did find something. He discovered a secret room. However, it had a combination lock and the word "idea" written above it. Do you have any idea what the code might be? "9451. The code is the number of each of the letters in the alphabet. The door opened to the suspect's secret office. At first glance, there was nothing suspicious inside. A table with a book in the middle, some dusty furniture, and a picture on the wall. The detective examined the painting and found a safe with a 3-digit code behind it. Next to it, there was a note with a hint. P270L7-8. Can you guess what the detective needs to do next? The detective realized that the note meant page 270, lines 7 to 8. He should check out the book on the table. The detective found the necessary lines on page 270. They read, After wandering through the desert for 4 days and 3 nights, I came across a couple of travelers. They fed me and gave me one of their camels. This is a clue that can help crack the code to the safe. What is it? $7.21. 4 days and 3 nights make 7. A couple of travelers is 2. And don't forget about 1 camel. The detective opened the safe and found the evidence that proved that the suspect was guilty. In the middle of the night, someone stole a unique artifact from a museum. The museum guard claimed it had been a robber. Detective Ridd arrived at the crime scene immediately and questioned the guard. The man said, I was walking around the museum. Suddenly I saw a dark shadow. I called out to them, but they didn't respond. But Detective Ridd noticed that something was wrong with this story. Can you guess what it is? There are only one person's footprints on the floor. If there was the guard and the criminal in the museum, shouldn't there be 2 sets of footprints? Detective Ridd asked the guard what he did next. The man said, I ran after the thief and saw them break the glass door and steal the artifact. The alarm didn't go off, as they had probably turned it off. Is the guard telling the truth? The door is indeed broken, but it's also open. It can only be opened with a key. It looks like someone opened the door to prevent the alarm from going off, and then broke the glass to hide the traces. The detective asked the man what had happened next. The guard said, I ran up to the criminal and tried to stop them, but they sprayed something in my eyes, and I lost consciousness. When I woke up, I immediately called the police. Is he telling the truth? His eyes look totally fine. The robbery happened just a few hours ago. If the guard was telling the truth, his eyes would at least look red. He must be lying. The guard turned out to be the thief and was arrested.
"10 detective riddles only the most attentive 1% can solve." Number 10. A detective and the blacksmith brothers. On a snowy winter night, the detective was resting in front of the fireplace. Suddenly, somebody threw a snowball at his window. The hit was so strong that the glass shattered. The detective stood up and had just enough time to notice 3 kids who lived in the neighborhood running away. They were brothers with the names Sam Blacksmith, Peter Blacksmith, and Mark Blacksmith. The next day, a paper note was left on the detective's door. There it was written, "Blacksmith." He threw the snowball. The detective knew immediately which brother to question. Okay, now you have 15 seconds. Hopefully enough time to figure it out. The symbol, ? is called the question mark. So here we go. Blacksmith. He threw the snowball. Number 9. Hotel room. A woman was staying in her hotel room when somebody knocked at the door. When she opened it, she saw an unknown man. He looked surprised and said, "I apologize. I thought it was my room." He turned away and went in the direction of the elevators. The woman, however, returned to the room and dialed security. Why was she so suspicious? Have you already figured it out? Time is ticking. The woman logically decided that if the man had thought that the room was his, he wouldn't have knocked. Such behavior is typical for those criminals who break into hotel rooms and steal whatever they can. They knock on the door to make sure there's nobody inside. Number 8. Suicide or murder. A detective comes to a crime scene. A man is said to jump out of a window of an abandoned building and commit suicide. The detective goes inside the building to the first floor, to the room at the front. He lights a cigarette, goes up to the window which faces the dead man, opens it, and throws the cigarette out. Then he goes to the second floor and does the same. He continues until he has visited all the floors and repeated the action again and again. Then he returns to his team and says that it was by no means a suicide, but a murder. How did he find it out? It took the detective much longer than 15 seconds to understand the truth. What about you? Are you smarter? When a person commits suicide jumping from a high floor, they don't tend to close the window behind them. But in this case, none of the windows which faced the dead man were left open. It means that there was somebody who closed them after the man died. Number 7. Iced tea. Two young ladies were having dinner together. They both ordered iced tea. One of them was very thirsty and drank very fast. She had 5 glasses during the time, the other drank only 1. Tragically, the girl who was nursing her drink and drinking slowly died. The other stayed alive, but it turned out that all the drinks they had been served contained poison. How is it possible that the girl who drank more survived? A strange case. Are you ready with the answer? In fact, the poison was contained in the ice. The ice in the tea of the girl who drank fast didn't have time to melt, but the ice cubes in the other girl's drink melted, releasing the poison into her tea. Number 6. Mysterious death in the car. A man was found shot to death in his car. The policemen were puzzled, as there was no gunpowder on his clothes or anywhere else in the car. This meant that the person who shot him was outside, but all the windows were closed, all the doors locked, and the only bullet hole was on the man's body. How was it possible? Perhaps some mystic powers? Here's your 15 seconds. The answer is actually quite simple. The car where the man had been killed was a convertible. When the fatal shot sounded, the roof was down. Number 5. Fly in coffee. A woman was having breakfast at a nice restaurant. At one moment, she noticed a fly in her coffee. She was indignant and made the waiter bring her another cup of the drink. After he returned with a new cup of coffee, she shouted, "What is the service in this place? You have brought me the same cup of coffee." How did she understand it? Perhaps the woman was a psychic? What do you think? She had already put sugar in her previous cup of coffee. When she tried the new one, it was sweet. Number 4. In court for killing the wife. A man is accused of killing his wife. His lawyer, in his final statement, declares that the wife of the man, in fact, hasn't been killed and will enter the courtroom in a minute. Everybody in the room, including the judge and the jury, turns and looks at the door, and the lawyer with the defendant looks at them. Several minutes pass and the lawyer says, "It proves that you are not so sure that my client has killed his wife. Otherwise, you wouldn't believe me." Almost immediately after that, the jury comes up with a guilty verdict. Why does it happen? 15 seconds to find the answer. The man who had been accused wasn't looking at the door. He was sure his wife wouldn't enter, as he had killed her. Number 3. A case of a smuggler. A man carrying 2 bags with sand crosses the Mexican border on a bicycle every day. Customs officers regularly check the bags, and all the time, they contain sand. It is obvious that the man smuggles something, but the officers can't realize what it is exactly. As they don't have any proof, the man crosses the border without interruptions. What does he smuggle? Your time has started. This creative individual distracts the custom officer's attention with the bags of sand, but in fact, he smuggles bicycles. Number 2. Suicide message. A body of a man was found in the flat. At some moment, he collapsed against his desk, a gun in his hand. The police found a cassette recorder nearby. When they pressed the play button, what they heard was, "I can't live like this anymore." Then the sound of a gunshot was heard. However, the detective immediately figured out that it was a murder. How did he realize that it wasn't a suicide? Surely, you already know the answer. If not, you still have some time. If the man had killed himself, he by no means would have been able to rewind the tape. Conclusion: there was someone else. Number 1. Crime scene. A man killed his wife in their car. He used a knife which he later threw away into an abyss where nobody was going to find it. His wife's body he took out of the car. He was very careful and left no fingerprints. After that, he headed home. In a couple of hours, he got a call from the police. They informed him that his wife had been killed, and he had to arrive at the crime scene right away. As soon as he got there, however, he was suspected for the murder. How did the police realize it had been him who was guilty? And 15 seconds for you. Take your time. The husband wasn't informed of the definite location of the crime scene. Despite that, he came to the right place.
It's time to twist your brain one more time. 9 riddles only people with high IQs can solve. Alright, riddle number 1. Your task is the following. Empty 1 jar of milk and 1 jar of water into a bowl. Oh wait, you couldn't think this would be that simple. There are several conditions. You must be able to differentiate between the milk and the water. You can separate the milk from the water. And finally, you aren't allowed to use any kinds of dividers to keep these 2 liquids apart. Wow, that's a task even Cinderella didn't have to deal with. Will you be able to figure out how to separate the inseparable? 20 seconds for you to do this. In fact, all you need to do is to pour the water into the bowl first and freeze it. Then after that, just add the milk. And then you have milk on the rocks. Riddle number 2. There's a magician famous for the tricks he performs. One of such tricks is staying under the water for 10 minutes. However, one day, John Smart challenges the magician, saying that he will stay under the water for 2 minutes longer. To say that the magician is surprised is to say nothing. He accepts the bet and promises John to give him $5,000 if he does beat the record. All in all, John wins and gets his money. How does he manage to do this? Do you think that John could be practicing not to breathe underwater since childhood? Or perhaps he's an amphibian? What's your idea? You have 20 seconds to make up your mind. Well, to tell you the truth, John was cheating just a bit. He took a glass, filled it with water, and held it over his head for 12 minutes. Yep, always read the fine print on the contracts you sign. Riddle number 3. Sam Princeton is so unhappy with his life, so frustrated with his boss picking at him, and so angry with himself for being too weak to leave his job and start a new life, that he shoots himself right between his eyes in the bathroom. The bullets are real, the revolver is real as well. However, in just a second, Sam goes out of the bathroom alive and unharmed. How is it possible? That's not a piece of cake. Or perhaps you've already figured it out. If not, you still have 20 seconds to use. The thing is that Sam didn't shoot at his real self, he shot his reflection in the mirror. Riddle number 4. In the city where people are keen on brain teasers and riddles, 4% of people don't list their phone numbers. So, if we select 40 random people from the phone directory, how many of them will have unlisted numbers? Oops, seems you'll have to apply some knowledge of mathematics here. 20 seconds to refresh everything you've ever learned. The answer may make you indignant. You've opened your math school books after all, but it's 0%. If the numbers of these 40 people are in the phone directory, they are already listed by default. Riddle number 5. You have 7 guests at your birthday party, and you've got to figure out how to cut your round birthday cake only 3 times to make 8 equal-sized slices, 7 for your guests and 1 for you, of course. Time's a-ticking, and your guests are waiting for their cake, so get going. Answer? Well, first off, you have to cut vertically right down the middle of the cake to make 2 equal pieces. Do the same thing, but this time horizontally to make 4 slices. Your third and final cut should be laterally across the cake, which will quickly turn your 4 slices into 8. So how'd you do on this one? No worries, we still got tons more. Riddle number 6. A blind man had been dreaming of being able to see again for many years. This had been his biggest wish. After some time, his doctor confirmed that he could have an operation that would solve his problem. The man couldn't be happier. The surgery went well, and the man took the train to go home. The doctor allowed him to take his bandages off 3 hours after the operation. So the man was so impatient that he did this while still on the train. But as soon as he finished, he committed a suicide jumping off the train. His operation was successful, so why did he do this? 20 seconds for you to solve this mystery. Why could a man whose dream has come true kill himself? In fact, it was a tragic coincidence. When the man opened his bandages, the train was going through a dark tunnel. That's why the man thought he was still blind and killed himself. Riddle number 7. Your friend asks you for a favor and gives you $5 asking you to buy something to eat, something to drink, something to feed his cow with, and something to plant in his garden. At the same time, you're allowed to buy just one thing. What are you going to buy? To eat, to drink, to feed the cow, and to plant? Wow! Doesn't your friend think that's a little bit too much? Do you know the solution to his riddle? If not yet, you still have 20 seconds. You can go and buy a watermelon. You can eat it, you can drink it, you can feed the cow with the rinds, and as for the watermelon seeds, you can easily plant them in the garden. Riddle number 8. Once a king sentenced a man to death for a crime he had committed. However, the king was a kind man, so he allowed the man to choose the way he would prefer to die. But the man was clever and managed to say something that saved him from the capital punishment. Which death did he choose? You have only 20 seconds to figure it out, but if you need more time, don't forget, you can pause the video. Well, being a clever man, the culprit chose to die of old age. Riddle number 9. Two men are standing on the edge of an abyss on a wood board. One of them is holding a gun and wants to shoot the other one. But if the second guy falls down, the first one will fall into the abyss. Is there a possible way for one of them to survive? Who will actually die? 20 seconds for you to solve this dilemma. In fact, the thing is that the answers to this riddle are too diverse and everyone just thinks differently. So, what is your idea? We hate to leave you hanging over the abyss, but hey, it's what we do sometimes.